We just got the finale for X-Men 97 Season 1, so in this video, I'm answering all your burning questions because we're breaking down the ending of the show. Let's talk about where the X-Men are. There have already been people online talking about this, not the first person to bring it up, need to specify that. If you look at where they are in the past, and you look at where they are in the future, what you see is the Alpha and the Omega of the life of Apocalypse. The reason why is because where they are in the future, that's a future where Apocalypse rules the world. And as you saw when they go back to the distant past, that is before Apocalypse becomes the villain that we all know and love. So, what's going on here? If you guys notice in the scene, when Beast walks over the hillside and you see that great big huge dome off in the distance, that's Ramatut. Now, how does all this tie together? How does the origin of Apocalypse coincide with Kang the Conqueror? Okay, so in Marvel Comics, there's two different origins for Apocalypse. There's the newer one, which they're clearly not doing. Then there's the old school origin, which looks to be the one that they are focusing on. The old school origin goes like this. Kang the Conqueror traveled all the way back to the days of ancient Egypt and took on the moniker of Ramatut. Now, there was a reason why he did this originally. When Marvel created the origin of Apocalypse, they actually blended the two together. But the way Apocalypse tied into it is Apocalypse was born to a tribe out there in Egypt somewhere. And because of his physical appearance, they considered him to be a bad omen. So they literally left him for dead in the desert. He was ultimately discovered by another group called the Sandstormers, led by a guy named Baal. And Baal, in contrast to Apocalypse's original group, actually saw Apocalypse as a positive omen. Specifically, he believed he was meant for a great destiny. Now, what this meant was explained to Apocalypse later on when he basically became of age. And Baal took him to what was in effect the ship of Kang the Conqueror. Not really knowing what the ship was or fully understanding it, what they saw on the inside, or at least what Apocalypse witnessed on the inside, were basically all these murals and statues and these depictions of the person he would become. Come to find out, Kang going into ancient Egypt was done for the purpose of finding Apocalypse before he rose to power, and knowing how powerful he would become, taking Apocalypse with him and raising Apocalypse as his heir, right, as his own, and then using Apocalypse and his vast powers to effectively solidify his control and destroy all the superheroes on Earth. Such as it was, it didn't work out for a couple different reasons. The first among these was the arrival of the Fantastic Four, who basically helped to defeat Ramatut. The second among these was actually Apocalypse himself. And the reason for this was that when Ramatut had learned where Apocalypse was alongside Baal, he had sent his forces to massacre the Sandstormers and then in turn capture Apocalypse, and whatever happened to Baal happened. Ultimately, Baal was killed in a cave-in and Apocalypse escaped. But because all this was done at the orders of Ramatut, Apocalypse ended up infiltrating the kingdom of the Pharaoh, all the while plotting and scheming how he was going to destroy the Pharaoh. What ended up happening is he fell in love with a girl named Nefertiri. I can't remember exactly what her name was. When she saw what he actually looked like, she freaked out. And due to heartbreak and any number of factors, the emotional distress, his X gene activated, his powers kicked in. Now, if I remember correctly, right, to the best of my knowledge, and I could be wrong here, but if I remember correctly, Apocalypse's original powers without any celestial modification was immortality and then size alteration, but also like physical enhancements, like he was super strong and super fast and all that kind of stuff. Regardless, he just starts losing it and just starts like attacking the entirety of Ramatut's kingdom. Between that and the arrival of the Fantastic Four, Ramatut fled back to his time as Kang the Conqueror and just kind of went forward and did his own thing. But let's kind of fast forward a bit, right? That's Apocalypse in the past. Let's jump forward to the far-flung future, Mother Askani and the Askani clan. Now, this is where things get a little hairy, chaps, so this is where you gotta buckle up, because Mother Askani is Rachel Summers. She's the daughter of Jean Grey and Cyclops from Days of Future Past. Let's talk about time travel. So in Marvel Comics, the way things played out was like this. The assassination of Senator Robert Kelly, Moira McTaggart, and Professor Xavier takes place by Mystique and her Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. That causes Days of Future Past. In Days of Future Past, Cyclops and Jean, before they're captured and ultimately executed, they have Rachel Summers. Rachel Summers is raised in just one of these camps where mutants and humans are confined by the Sentinels, and she has an inhibitor collar. Now, Rachel Summers, alongside Kitty Pryde, Colossus, Franklin Richards, Magneto, who's wheelchair bound, Wolverine, and I think Storm, they all basically end up engineering an escape. And the whole goal for this is to get rid of the inhibitor collars and for Rachel Summers to send the mind of Kitty Pryde into the past to prevent Days of Future Past from happening, right? To stop the assassination. She's ultimately successful in doing so. Here's the question. If she comes from a future that's prevented, then how could she end up coming from that future? Because the future doesn't exist. That's called a paradox. So the way that Marvel solved this problem is they said that Days of Future Past was the guaranteed future, but because that future was averted, it became an alternate reality. So in effect, Days of Future Past in Marvel Comics is no different than any of like the what if episodes that you saw out there in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, except now it's what if Senator Robert Kelly and Moira McTaggart and Professor Xavier were assassinated and Sentinels took over North America. But within the comics, Rachel, not realizing she was now in an alternate reality, did not understand why her future had not been averted. So she travels back to the present day. She learns the reality that she was in an alternate reality and so on and so forth. And then she hangs out for a while. She joins a superhero team called Excalibur, which was a superhero team based out of Britain. And then she becomes a host for the Phoenix Force, fights Galactus for a little while. That was a dope story. And then she ends up taking the power of the Phoenix back to Days of Future Past and then undoes everything in that timeline. She effectively saves the day. Now, there does end up being some crazy cross-time capers and she ends up in the far-flung future and yada, yada, yada. But because of a series of circumstances, she ends up stranded in the 37th century. And that's where you see her in X-Men 97 at the end of season 1. And she becomes Mother Askani, the leader of the tribe itself. Now, here's how it all kind of ties in to the character of Cable. So in Marvel Comics, the way this played out is unlike X-Men 97, it was not Sinister who infected Cable with the techno-organic virus. It was Apocalypse. And the reason why was because at that point in time, Apocalypse's powers were so extreme that he had to jump from one host's body to the next because his powers would burn that body out. It's not really the case anymore. But Cable, as a baby, was viewed as the new host for Apocalypse. But to test him and to see whether or not he could withstand Apocalypse's powers, he was infected with the techno-organic virus. This leads to a fight between Apocalypse and Cyclops and X-Factor and the Inhumans and so on and so forth. Basically, Rachel Summers shows up and she says, I'm from the future. I'm not going to go into details about it because you don't need to know. But basically, there's a better chance of curing your son in the future than right now. So let me take him there. Rachel does that. What also happens, and the reason why you see Jean Grey and Cyclops in that future in X-Men 97 is because in the comics, the minds of Cyclops and Jean are taken to the future as well, and they're put in different bodies. They take the names Red and Slim to keep their identities secret, and then in turn, they raise Cable as a child in that future. So with all the comic book stuff out of the way, here's the question: how does all this tie together in X-Men 97? And what are we looking at in season 2? Well, I would say this. It's entirely possible that Bishop took Cable to the Days of Future Past timeline under the idea that Forge could cure him. But Forge is like, I can't do anything with this, right? This technology is beyond me, or it's beyond my skill set. If he is going to be saved, you're going to have to take him to a time and a place where the technology is advanced enough to do that. Presumably that's how he would end up in the year 4000 with Rachel Summers as Mother Askani. And he's just raised there. Right now, how that unfolds, I don't entirely know. We know that when he came out and he said, I sense no reason to be afraid, his telepathy and telekinesis is manifesting. Presumably he was taught about the nature of the techno-organic virus and the danger of not using his telepathy and telekinesis to keep the virus at bay. So he doesn't use the full totality of his powers. That's why he doesn't come out and just read their minds. Because every time he's not using his telepathy to keep the techno-organic virus from eating his body alive, it'll start to encroach. So again, there's all kinds of possibilities here. I mean, I guess maybe we could just kind of sit down and make like a full-on theory and speculation about what's happening, but at the end of the day, we're just kind of explaining the way the ending of the story went. So here's what I want to know from you guys. Who do you think time displaced the X-Men? Because if I'm a betting man, I would say it's either Roma or Kang the Conqueror. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.